Okay, so I normally never do this, but I applied for 2 credit cards on the same day. And for whatever reason, most of my recent credit card applications have not been as straightforward as I'd like them to be. So let me tell the story about that second application, which was for the Bilt Mastercard. Now, right before this application, I had just applied for the US Bank Altitude Reserve Card, and for that application, I had done a lot of preparation, including establishing a relationship with US Bank, guarding my credit report, and boosting my credit score using the all zero except one method, since US Bank has some very strict unofficial guidelines when it comes to their credit card approvals. And if you want to see how I did that exactly, I'll leave a link to my Altitude Reserve Watch Me Apply video up top as well as down in the description below. But depending on the outcome of that application, I also had planned on applying for the Bilt Mastercard on the same day. The reason for this was that my credit report was so optimized at this point that it just made sense to fire off 2 applications at around the same time, and in my view, it didn't really matter if I did this on the same day or another day within that same month. So some of you may be wondering, well, Stan, I get that you applied for 2 cards on the same day, but why did you decide to apply for the US Bank Altitude Reserve Card first? And there are 2 reasons why I decided to do this. The first reason is more general, in that US Bank tends to be very particular when it comes to what they expect when you apply for their credit cards. Specifically, they usually want you to have at most 0 to 1 new credit cards and 0 to 1 new hard inquiries on your credit report in the last 6 months. Some people have bad luck and get denied for US Bank credit cards with these numbers even within the last 12 months. But some people have even better luck and get approved with much higher numbers within that same 6-month period. In any case, like with any credit card application, exceptions apply and your mileage may vary. But I can confidently say that with US Bank, you are more likely to be denied if you have any number of recent inquiries and recent new accounts in the last 6 months. And for that reason, I decided to apply for the US Bank Altitude Reserve Card first, since I have been gardening my credit report specifically for that card. On the other hand, I'm not aware of any of these restrictions when it comes to Wells Fargo and the Bilt Mastercard. I know that Wells Fargo has a rule where they may deny you for a credit card if you open a credit account with them in the last 6 months, but this doesn't really apply to me since the Bilt card would be my first credit card with them. And it's also known that if you have a previous relationship with Wells Fargo, they may look at your application more favorably. But I've seen plenty of data points of people getting approved for the Bilt Mastercard without this type of relationship, so I wasn't concerned about that either. So that was the first reason. But the second reason was more personal, and it was that I really wanted the US Bank Altitude Reserve Card. If I were to choose between both of these cards, I 100% would prefer getting the US Bank Altitude Reserve Card first. As a card with a permanent, uncapped 3x multiplier for mobile wallets, this had a lot of potential to get me a ton of value with my everyday expenses, including groceries, gas, and restaurants. The Bilt card, of course, would get me 1x points back on rent, which is also great, but because the US Bank Altitude Reserve Card is so much harder to get, I'd much rather go with that one, and if that was at the expense of getting denied for the Bilt card, I would be okay with that. Okay, so that was the strategy. Apply for the US Bank Altitude Reserve Card first, hopefully get approved, and then apply for the Bilt Mastercard right after. But after submitting that first application, I was automatically denied for the US Bank Altitude Reserve Card, which was awful when I first got that message. But of course, it's not a denial until you confirm that it's a true denial. After calling customer service reconsideration, I was ultimately approved for that card about 3 hours later. So about 15 minutes after that, I went to the Bilt website, signed up for my free Bilt account, and then proceeded to submit my Bilt Mastercard application. And to give you some context about how my application looked right before that second application, here are those relevant stats. Like I mentioned before, I had no previous relationship with Wells Fargo, so this would be my first product with them. My Experian credit score was 812, and I had 0 new accounts in the last 6 months, 0 accounts in the last 12 months, and 4 accounts in the last 24 months. And I know that I just applied for a credit card the same day, but that new account wouldn't report for another month on my credit report, but technically you'd add 1 to all of those previous numbers. Now, in contrast with hard inquiries, the new hard pull does report immediately to the credit bureaus, and since US Bank pulled Experian, I now had a total of 3 hard inquiries, 1 from that day, and 2 that were over 12 months old. And I'm sure that this new inquiry lowered my credit score by a few points or so, but when I checked Experian, the score was still the same, but I'd assume that it's a little lower anyways. Okay, so with that information, let's go over to the computer and watch me apply for this card. So like I mentioned earlier, it's helpful to first create your free Bilt account, so I did that first before continuing on to the application. And at this point, I want to give a huge shout out to my friend and colleague, Joshua Butler. If you guys watch Credit Card YouTube, I'm sure you've heard of this man, and he's been such a great teacher and mentor, helping me improve not only my video editing skills with Adobe Premiere, but also my thumbnail skills as well with Adobe Photoshop. And yes, I edit my own videos and do my own thumbnails, but they would not be nearly as good without his advice and feedback. And so, thank you, Josh, for all of your help, but with that being said, I do also want to thank him by using his Bilt Mastercard referral on his website, so I'm going to click on that referral link here to bring me to my Bilt application. And so here we are at the main page, and if I scroll down, I can get to this button here that says Apply Now. So let's go ahead and click that button. Okay, so here we are at the application page, and I'll say it again, this is a good time to pause and make sure that we have the right card with the right sign-up bonus. But as you all know, the Bilt Mastercard does not have a sign-up bonus, so we don't have to worry about that. But yes, we do have the right card here, so we're good to go. Since I'm logged into my Bilt account, a lot of the basic demographic info is already pre-populated, but other information you need to provide is if you're a US citizen, if you rent or own, what your rent or mortgage is, your employment status, and your total annual household income. So after filling out all that info, consenting to their terms, and authorizing Wells Fargo to see your social security number, we can go ahead and click Continue. Okay, so it looks like this is the final page where we can review the card's terms and conditions, and once we're satisfied, we can go ahead and submit this application. So let's go ahead and do that in 3, 2, 1, and submit. Okay, so here goes application number 2. It says, just a moment, hang tight, we're processing and validating your information. Okay, well, let's see what it says. Thank you for applying, your application is pending. We received your application for a Bilt Mastercard, your application is being reviewed and will provide you with a credit decision soon. And I think there's more down here, and it says, what happens next? If we need to contact you, we'll reach out shortly. If your application is approved, we'll send you an email letting you know your card is on the way. It should arrive in up to 7 business days, and if we are unable to extend you credit, we will let you know why in writing. Well, it looks like I have a lot more work to do. Now, right after I submitted my application, 2 things happened. The first was that I received an email from Bilt saying that my application was in review, and they also provided a number to call to check on my application status, but sadly, by the time I submitted this application, it was already after the time that office had closed. So my plan was to call them back in the morning, but I also received another notification. And this notification was from a credit monitoring service that I had, which let me know that a single hard pull was done, which I expected, but what I didn't expect was that hard pull was on TransUnion. I'm not sure why, but I fully expected them to pull Experian, but for whatever reason, they pulled TransUnion, and this is important. Because they pulled a different credit bureau, the data points I explained before are going to actually be a little different. My TransUnion credit score was 822 with the same new accounts of 0 new accounts in the last 6 months, 0 accounts in the last 12 months, and 4 accounts in the last 24 months. But with TransUnion, I only had 1 hard inquiry that was over 12 months old. So even though that I submitted an application for the Altitude Reserve card, that application pulled Experian, but not TransUnion. But because Wells Fargo didn't pull Experian, they would have no knowledge of this recent hard inquiry. And knowing that Wells Fargo pulled a different credit bureau than my previous application with the US Bank may help me in my discussion when I call customer service, which I plan on doing the following day like I mentioned before. And I expect that my application went into a pending status because this is my first credit application with Wells Fargo, so they probably needed some additional identifying information. So the following day, I called Wells Fargo customer service to check the status of my application. After going over some basic demographic information, the customer service representative told me that they needed some documents to verify my identity. And those documents included a picture ID, for example, a driver's license or US passport, and 2 documents that provided address verification, such as 2 utility bills. She then told me that I could either send these by certified mail, or I could fax the documents to their office, and I could go to a Wells Fargo bank branch to do this for free. So I took down the fax number and proceeded to gather all the documents, and then made a trip out to my nearest Wells Fargo branch to send them via fax, since I didn't have one available to use at the time. Now, I don't know what your experiences are at banks, but I was going on a weekday during my lunch period. And typically, the banks that I currently bank with are pretty full during that time, so I wasn't really optimistic that I could complete all of this at the time that I was going. But when I went into this particular Wells Fargo branch, it was completely empty, which took me by surprise at first, but hey, I guess I got lucky that day, and so I was able to fax those documents for free with a banking representative and was in and out of there within 10 minutes. And so I went about my day, and 3 hours after sending the fax, I received this email congratulating me on getting approved for the Bilt Mastercard with a credit limit of $30,000. So after it was all said and done, this is the main takeaway I have from this experience. Remember, after I applied for the card, on the pending page, they said, if we need to contact you, we'll reach out shortly. And although I think you could wait for them to call you, I don't think that's the best move. If you really want a credit card, take that extra effort and call customer service as soon as you can after you get that pending or denial notice so that you can get to work and be more in control of that credit card application. No one is going to care more about your application than you. So I'm all about being proactive when it comes to credit card applications so you can know exactly what's going on at all points of the process. And so that is the story of my Bilt Mastercard application. Like you saw, this wasn't an automatic approval, but if this happens to you on your Bilt credit card application, I hope my experience helped you figure out your next moves in your situation so you can move from a pending status to hopefully an approval. And to see how I turned a denial for the US Bank Altitude Reserve card into an approval, check out this video next.